allowing us to. So we've been chatting offline, and sometimes when you get into a flow, Sheryl, you get into that conversation, then you think, okay, I should definitely be recording this. So first of all, you're extremely welcome, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And 1,000 thank yous to you. I'm not going to do a huge big introduction because it's all in your book as well. This particular book that we're going to be talking about today, Kindness Rocks. All of the themes, every one of the themes in the book, not only are they inspiring, but I feel they connect very much to Golden Rule Day, and that's why we're having you for this celebration, but also to empathy, to compassion, to so much that we see in the world, but sometimes are nervous about how to approach it, how to have the conversation. And this is where I got really inspired. And I'd love for you to maybe introduce yourself through the book as well. And I know you've written many other books, 30 other books as well, plus 30 books. So we can talk about each one of them, but this particular one and the themes that are coming out, it was a conversation that you wanted to have, I believe, with your children, with your children that you've been telling me about here. And how do we do that best? Well, you're an author, and you decided to try and put these themes of compassion, of empathy, of the doing. And we can talk all day about the golden rule and what that is, or GoldenRuleism. And there's so many correlations and connections here. But you put it in a book, and it's really exciting to know that it's just been published. You were telling me it's in America, it's in China, it's going back to the UK pretty soon, and hopefully will be translated in many other languages to put it out there to the rest of the world. But can I just start, if it's okay, by using the words of another Irish guy who probably talks an awful lot as well. Another Irish man that's living outside of Ireland right now and finding his way. But the author, Paddy Donnelly, who's a sort of a well-known author as well, but the Doo-Doos are not, people might know that book. But what he says is what I feel after reading this book to our children over the last 24 hours or so. And they made me read it twice, by the way, so just to get it. But what he said was, it's a brilliant story full of love and kindness, and the artwork is simply stunning. Each spread explodes with color and magic. And I think that's the curiosity. And I was telling you while I was reading this on my computer screen rather than the hard copy that I will get, but I don't have yet. I was reading it, and our two kids were just excited. They were excited to see what the next page is, what Johnny was doing, what Mary the monkey was doing, what the tiger is doing. And the characters were coming to life as they were getting more excited about it. And there's so much anecdotes and everything else. But can you introduce yourself? Is that okay, through your most recent and exciting piece of work?
So like I've just said to you off camera, I'm a mum of 4. So I'm the other end of the scale now. My kids are all grown up, the eldest being 21, the youngest 14. I'm a former primary school teacher, so I've always been involved with children, even before my kids were born. And when I was teaching, everything I did, obviously as a primary teacher, you do a little bit of everything. And back when I was teaching, which sounds like it's from the Stone Age, we did everything, we did all our subjects, whereas now, you know, people lean on each other. If you're better at teaching history, you will come in and teach history. If you're the mathematician, you will come and teach math. Then we just did everything, basically. So what I used to do was I always told a story. Whatever subject we did, I would bring a story into, even maths. You know, going back to 3 little kittens who lost their mittens, you've got 3 sets of 2 mittens. I used to teach the children through characters, because I always found that if you've got a character or a book that a child can relate to, the spark is there. So I always tried to bring literacy. I mean, literacy was my thing anyway. I've loved it from when I was a kid myself. I used to read Enid Blyton books, and I just always had my nose in a book. So that's also carried through with me into teaching, and then with my own children. And I've noticed, I mean, more and more now, books try to deal with different subjects. I wrote a story called One Little Bird, which was about deforestation, which kind of started getting into the importance of houses and, you know, what our home means to us. But when it came to the subject of homelessness, which I think more and more now, when my kids were younger, you know, you'd pass the odd sort of homeless person on the street and they did ask questions, and I used to wrongly try to avoid going into too much depth. partly because as a mum, a dad, you don't want to worry your kids that this could happen to them or to someone in your own family. And partly because, in all honesty, I didn't know how to explain it. How do you explain why someone got in that position, you know, through no fault of their own or circumstances? So it's sort of, this has been brewing for years and years now, from when I stopped teaching, when my eldest son was born. And when you're out and about with your kids and, you know, you see things and they're asking questions, it's been there in my head for years that I wanted to write this book, but I just didn't know how. And I've tried playing around with different things, different characters. First of all, I had it, you know, a story where it was about people rather than animals, but that felt too close for the age group that I was writing for, because obviously this is pitched for like 4 to 8 year olds. So, you know, there's still that thing, you don't want to scare them, but you want to spark the questions and get them asking things. So there was a couple of books that I'd seen out there which already deal with this topic. So Tom Percival, The Invisible, I don't know if you're familiar with that one. Duncan Beattie, The Last Chip, which again, they're both very different books. Tom Percival uses people in his book, and it's about sort of the community aspect of homelessness and poverty. And then with Duncan Beattie, his leans much more towards the kindness. So it was about this character giving I think it was a pigeon, is the last chip there because they were hungry. So both sorts of very different, and I wanted somewhere in the middle of that. So I knew I wanted something where it was an animal character. I wanted something where I could go into maybe a little bit more depth about the causes of homelessness. But this was the tricky bit, because how do you talk about, you know, things like domestic violence in a kid's book? It just seemed really deep. So these ideas were all sort of in there. I knew what I wanted. It was just getting them together and making this book. So I played around for years and years, and then the pandemic hit, and I thought, what better time to really focus and try and do this? So I was just researching through various things on the computer, and I came across a photograph of a well-known rock star who's been around for 40 years. It's
probably the number one question that everyone that wants to interview wants the answer to that question. And I didn't want to dive in straight away. We might get there at some point, but that was certainly the $1 million question when I was reading through the book. Is like, I'm sure that's been one of the first questions that people, even though the themes are so deep, people want to know, who is the rock star? But we never know. We might get there.
There are clues in there.
Okay, we have to read it again.
Yeah.
But sorry, I didn't want to break your flow there, but it was a rock star you came across.
Yeah. So this person, he's been involved, he's been very philanthropic for about 20 years now. He's got his own non-profit organisation. He's very big on helping with affordable housing. He's got a restaurant where people pay it forward, which I love. We've got a similar thing in Liverpool, paper cup coffee, and I just think it's amazing. You know, it's such a simple idea. You go in and they've got the little post-it notes on where, you know, you go in and buy a coffee, some toast, and you pay for an extra one, and it's just the simplest thing. You know,
it's simple things that are the most effective, though.
Yeah, so he was basically, during the pandemic, obviously they weren't allowed volunteers. So he was in there washing the dishes and making sure that food was available, takeaway food that they could distribute to people in need. And it was just, you know, the way people say they have these light bulb moments. And I often think, did they really? It did. It was like a light bulb moment where I just saw the character. And obviously I said he's been around 40 years, so I'm going back to the 80s here, the big 80s hair. It had to be a lion. So it was a rock star lion. And then it just sort of spiraled from there. There was the original story stayed pretty much true to the idea that I had. But I've actually brought these to show you. When I say it stayed true, it was the same story, but 25 different versions, which just, it was literally little tweaks along the way. And that was how when the publisher finally got, that's what I'd gone through. And then obviously you do the tweaking with the publisher once they've got the finished book. But the actual story stayed the same. It was originally called The Voice. For the reason being that I wanted to, the whole idea of linking it to the homelessness was that people who are homeless often say they feel unseen and unheard in society, and you know,
visibility, a condition almost,
isn't it? Really, you can see why. So I thought this big rock star who sings, he's seen, he's heard all over the world, and it's just the juxtaposition of that. You know, he meets this homeless bear, and you know, you've obviously read the story. So when he starts as a rock star, he's singing because he wants to make people happy, and then circumstances happen during the story where he's unable to sing, and he kind of feels stripped of his identity. So because his voice is gone, he just feels he's unseen, he's unheard, which for someone who's had the total opposite of that, it's very hard. Then he meets a homeless bear. So there's the empathy side of it where children know he feels like that. So they can sort of start to piece together that this homeless bear also feels very unseen and unheard. And then that's when the kindness element comes in, where, you know, this bear's got nothing, but he's willing to share what little he has got. They share food, the bear talks, he helps to make Jonny feel better. And then that was when I sort of got the idea where I could bring more characters in and maybe go a little bit into the causes of homelessness. So when Jonny meets Busky's friends, Busky's the bear character, they've also
you connect souls straight away as well with Busky as well. I love that.
But do you know, originally I was going to have it where the bear sang as well. So, you know, you've got this rock star who's singing because he just loves to sing and to make people happy. But then the other extreme is you've got this bear who's singing, literally singing for his supper. You know, he needs food. But we just kept
straight away, Sheryl, sorry, but because these characters take on lives of their own then as well. And even with the girls, they were comparing them to other characters that they know as well. But with Busky, Busky Soul and the bear, empathy and compassion is just oozing out from the very first moment that they literally bump into each other. And there's so many other parallels. I know our little girl Kira was comparing. You said you straight away you thought about Jonny being a rock star, and the line came in. But of course, when they were watching Sing, which is, you know, not comparing everything to Hollywood, but the last thing that they've seen, it was the gorilla, or is it a gorilla? I'm getting my animals wrong maybe here, but it was the character that was a singer, that was a rock star. He had a London accent, actually, not a Liverpool accent that I'm hearing right now. And I've already given the line a Liverpool accent. But he came from poverty. He came from, and Kira was saying, you know, his daddy was in prison, and there were lots of issues that can lead very much to homelessness, to food poverty, to food insecurity. We're only a step away from it, but I love the fact that they could direct and compare other characters and the animals such an effective way.
That's great. That's exactly. It's all about. I mean, it doesn't matter, you know, how deep you could read this book as just a standalone story, but if you've got kids who you know can cope with that sort of depth, who some kids will ask questions, others will just read the story. They're done, aren't they? So there's that little bit of where you can play around with it. So obviously Busky, we hear in the story that Busky lost his home in a flood. So that's when you can start going into, you know, things like natural disasters and things, people can lose their home. Then you've got Gina the giraffe, who mentions that she left home because she was being bullied by Mr. Wolf. So, you know, a little gentle nod towards domestic abuse, and maybe some people are scared to go home, or they've got, you know, most kids know what bullying is, and you can go sort of down that route with them. And then the more difficult one was Tommy the tiger, who's got an injured paw. So he didn't want to go home because he was embarrassed because he couldn't hunt anymore. So that's, you know, you can start to look at how unemployment, people can lose their jobs because of illness or injury, which then has a knock-on effect. And the reason I thought of that, actually, I do a lot with the Whitechapel Centre in Liverpool. So, you know, they're a fantastic organisation. They do so much for homelessness in Liverpool. And for years and years now, I go into schools. I still can't switch off from my teaching head a little bit. So I go in as an author, and also for fundraising events with the children, normally linked to the books, but in this particular case, it wasn't. So for years, we've done you know, where the kids wear silly socks for school and they'll bring in a pair of socks. And I normally bag them up in bin bags and take them to the Whitechapel Centre, because socks, believe it or not, I'm going off on a tangent now, but socks are the most needed item and the least donated.
Right.
Yeah,
I wasn't aware of that.
I only learned sort of a few years back. And it's something that kids really switch on to, because they know themselves, if they've been playing sport, they get wet socks. It's horrible. It's horrible. You step in a puddle, you've got wet feet. It's a horrible feeling. So they do really sort of go, oh, you know, when I tell them that fact. So I've done this for years. So when Kindness Rocks started to develop in 2020, I thought there's a little thing we can do here, rock your socks. So we made it into rock your socks, where the kids came in like fancy socks or whatever. And I used to take the character, even though the book wasn't out, I took the character in with me, told them what the book was about, told them stories that the Whitechapel Centre had told me about real actual people and why they'd become homeless. And the kids were just gripped. They loved, that was the thing that got them the stories. So one of them was about this guy who, he was a lawyer, we said a doctor, because kids tend to know a doctor more than a lawyer. And he had become homeless. He was going out to work every day. He lived at home with his mum. His mum got ill. So bit by bit, he was staying home to care for his mum. He lost his job. His mum got taken into care and he ended up homeless. The Whitechapel Centre actually found him, helped him, and he now goes round as an ambassador for them and tells his story. And
it's a beautiful anecdote, and I'm sure lots of people can connect to that as well.
Yeah, exactly.
I love the fact that you're telling that story with passion, and I can see your energy for this as well. But they're real, they're lived experiences as well. And when you get, I definitely want to get to the book and all through the book. But when you get to the end of the book, I love the suggestions of why not do something. You know, we can talk about, you know, doing for all others what, you know, and in GoldenRuleism we talk, do for all others directly and indirectly, what you would like people to do for you. So exactly what you're talking about here, or decide don't do to any others what you wouldn't like done to you. So trying to get and for children, I know it's very difficult to sort of, under a certain age, maybe 10, 11, the research is still out on this, but when empathy can actually be understood, when they can detach themselves and their reality to other people's reality. And so the age group for this book, you know, 3 to 8.
We've sort of allowed a bit of wriggle room for that, because I'm actually going into a school in a couple of weeks' time and I'm reading it to the whole school, right up to the sort of 10, 11-year-olds, because of course you can
absolutely. And even 3. I mean, our daughter was 3 and she got it. She was asking questions all the way through. She wanted to come out and start today making her kindness rocks. That was one of the suggestions. You know, you decorate these rocks and you go and give them out.
And that's exactly what I'm doing with school. That's perfect. I love it.
Oh, lovely. Yeah. Because it's a tactile thing. It's something that you can do. And rather than becoming overwhelmed by a topic like homelessness or food insecurity or any of the challenging issues that we're dealing with in our time right now, the doing bit is just so powerful, especially, and as a primary teacher.
What you've said there, that's exactly what I wanted from the book, because when I was saying earlier about how it was such a difficult book to write, because there's no getting away from the fact it's a sad subject. It's, you know, it's heartbreaking to think that people are living in poverty like this. So I wanted to put a little spin on it where, you know, yeah, these bad things can happen, but look, we can do something. And to show them that, you know, even small acts of kindness, like bringing a pair of socks in for somebody, which seems like nothing, it makes a difference. It
joins the common humanity as well, in my opinion, when I'm listening to you talking here, Sheryl. You know, there's local poverty, food insecurity, but there's also international and global issues. And I know you've communicated with Elena, my partner, who works here in Spain. One of her hats, she manages a refugee center at the weekends here. But it's the local issues that are, you know, on our doorstep. Literally, there's a food support, there's a food kitchen, it has different names in different places, but they're on a daily basis. The kids can see people queuing up for food because they don't have it here in Madrid. And at the same time, you've got people coming from all over the world who are displaced, who are hungry, who are dealing with grief and all of the other issues, you know, from from conflict zones around the world. It can be really, really heavy, but joining the factors together, when you see it on your doorstep, and there's people locally, I'm sure in Liverpool as well, and Dublin where I'm from, and all over the world, it's rather than pitching people on a level against each other, why am I poor? Let's blame migrants, let's blame refugees. No, let's actually talk about our common humanity. And in the book, the animals were coming from different kingdoms, from different communities, from different parts of their animal world. And I think kids get that when they're seeing that. It's not me against, but actually, there's one character, you'd look sort of the nemesis or the protagonist, the cat in the book as well, who of course they're going to love after some time, but he was sort of the undercurrent of the sneakiness and looking to get one up on somebody else's abilities or inabilities.
And it's that juxtaposition again. It's showing, like you say, he's sort of I think one of the people who's just reviewed my book, Catherine, she said he's the villain, he's the villain of it. So you see his sort of unkindness and how, as soon as Jonny loses his voice, it's like, give me back the glasses, the boots, the bandana, you're not a rock star anymore. And he moves on to the next, then he wants to come back at the end when he's got his voice back again. So it's that you're highlighting the kindness of these characters by also showing his unkindness, and he gets
and again, don't do to any others what that cat is doing. It would connect to GoldenRuleism and Golden Rule on Golden Rule Day as well. But he was almost convinced, Jonny, that the big strong line with the big smile and the big hair and the big everything, convinced by this sort of squirmy looking cat that he was invisible because he didn't have what he was built up to have. He wanted to be given the high fives, and he says that, I think, in the book. He says, I miss the high fives, I miss the smiles and the dancing. He wanted to just be Jonny, but put up on a pedestal and then knocked down again. So he was convinced that he was nobody. So we were asking the kids, would he have, like, he believed that he was nobody until he bumped into the bear and then was offered kindness and compassion and maybe not a roof over his head, but to be out in the stars and get that food from Mary the monkey. But what we're asking the kids, would he have been invisible? Was he convinced that he was invisible? And that conversation was a really interesting one as well, about what people say about us and how that matters and how we can build up our own sense of agency and self-compassion and self-cultivation to not have to rely on a cat to tell us who we are, but actually know who we are ourselves. So there was so many layers that were going on there.
That's a lot of kids, I think, will sort of get that side of it, won't they? Because peer pressure and who's got this and who's wearing that. They experience it, not necessarily in the way in the book, but they experience it at their level, don't they, with friends. And it's funny, one of the things when I go into schools, one of the things I say to the children right away is, put your hand up if you can tell me about a time when someone has been kind to you. And they'll all, the hands will go up, and I'll ask them what it is. And it could be sharing, a bar of chocolate with them or helping them with their work or whatever. Then I'll say the flip side, tell me about a time when you've been kind to someone. And each time I'll ask them, how did that make you feel? So how did you feel when you were kind to someone? How did you feel when they were kind to you? And you see the mind, it's the same. That made me feel good when they were kind to me, but also when I was kind to them, that made me feel good. And they go, it's like that again. It's like the light bulb moment. So that's the other thing that I wanted to get across in this book, that being kind helped Jonny. Once he'd sort of realised that there was other ways he could be kind to people through helping and sharing, and that would give him inner happiness. And that's, what it's all about.
And you do it. I mean, that does come, certainly for me, Sheryl, it comes out in the characters. And I'm sorry for jumping in there, but there were lots of other phrases and stories, and even going back to Aesop's fables, thousands of years ago, the Greek mythology. You were able to bring that through the characters here, and the lessons, the simplicity of the lessons, and even the quotes that you use, for me, are really, really powerful. So I was rewording some of the key principles that I would try and connect my values to. I've said it a number of times already, but the one principle that we're going off within GoldenRuleism at the moment, and it's a tongue twister, and so I'm going to borrow some of your words from your book. But the tongue twister for adults It's, do for all others, but directly and indirectly what you would want done for you, or don't do for any others directly or indirectly, because you're bringing nature and other beings in there, what you wouldn't want done to you. So you're asking those questions to kids in primary schools in a much more simplified but as powerful way. And then the quote that comes out to me in the book, when Mary, it is Mary the monkey, isn't it? It's Maria. No, it is Mary the monkey. She says that in a world of plenty, nobody should go cold or hungry. I do what I can. And so every bit of that quote is important. We know that there's so much in the world. We know this disparity of wealth. We know a lot of the reasons why people are hungry today, and cold, and don't have homes over their head. And we can get into that on a political level. But Mary's saying, I do what I can. And that's just so powerful, to feel empowered and to have that gratitude that we can do something. And I think Jonny then rephrases that in his own words later in the book, because his voice was taken away from him. What's he going to do? What's he going to be able to offer people? So many of us feel, and we talked beforehand about, burnout, when you're trying to be empathic, you're trying to be compassionate, but we can get overwhelmed by things. Yeah. Kids we're, and I'm very aware of what's happening in the world right now. Myself and Elena are very connected with what's happening in the Middle East and what we're observing, how we're, we connect with the people there, and we try to act compassionately, but we can often do things that will overwhelm our kids without even knowing it. So for them to even have language and reference points within books like this it's really, really important. So it could be Palestine, or it could be Yemen. The world has plenty. Nobody should be hungry. Yet I know tonight, after we get off this call, friends of mine, people that I've lived with and been inspired by, are extremely hungry on the level of famine. And that's overwhelming in itself. But what can I do? Going back to Mary the monkey, what can I do today in a micro level that can, one, not overwhelm me and feel that I have agency, but two, actually make a difference as well to myself, the people around me, and hopefully to if we're doing it correctly, to inspire others. So I was like almost in tears reading the book last night. And
it's lovely to hear that. That's exactly what I want. I hid some books around Liverpool at the weekend for kids to find, and I put my social media details inside for the parents, because I thought it's difficult nowadays to know whether you're doing the right thing. So I just put a little note in saying what the book was, and it's just come out. I'm leaving a giveaway around Liverpool, and one of the parents who messaged me, she sent me a direct message, and the thing that stood out to me, she put, this book has already sparked lots of questions. And it was just like bingo. That's exactly it. Even if it's just one question to come out that they ask, that then, that leads to them knowing that they can make a difference. It doesn't matter whether it's that much,
And the spark being the forest fire, we often give that analogy when we're talking about compassion education as well, because the spark can be detrimental and the forest fire can be really detrimental, or that spark can be really, in a compassionate way, in a discerning way, it can be really hugely beneficial for people around us. So those little sparks are what we're trying to plant within our own children and the youngest age group and the communities we're connecting with. So you say it's just come out, the book, and there's plenty more to talk about the book, but the first time I saw a picture, it was you in Times Square with the book behind you, with the image of the book behind you, and incredible illustrations as well. I know your illustrator has a story of his own, I'm sure, coming through school and education.
I've never met Robert. We now message each other. We're in touch now, but up until the point when he'd done the illustrations, we'd never spoken. And there was a few little sort of very basic illustration notes that when I sent the story to the publisher. So these illustrations, he just sort of, his imagination has just really gone from my few words to his input. And when I first saw the character design for Jonny, it was just, I said to him, you're a mind reader. It was just literally like he'd read my mind. And all the other characters, the fact that I wanted it kept like a very natural setting, in the animal world. And just the little touches he's put in. He's a really clever, talented guy.
He's really, really good. But maybe he sees a part of his story as well. It's Roberto Garcia. Is that his name?
Yes, yeah.
you know, there's an element of Johnny's story potentially in Roberto's story, you know, people telling him this or telling him that. And, you know, he's offering happiness to the world through his art, through his illustrations and the way he sees it. Johnny was doing it through the voice, and many other people are doing it like your son at the moment in terms of sport. It's whatever it means and whatever your ability is at this moment, but that changes. You know, we talked about injuries. Your trajectory is going one way. You're going to be representing your family, your community, your pride, and everything else through sport or through music. And you get an injury and something changes. It happened to Johnny. His voice went, and he needed to almost reinvent. And the power of community in that as well. He didn't do it alone. He was assisted not just by one kind individual, the bear, but multiple kind individuals or animals in this respect. So reaching out to community in those moments of need is really important, it seems, from the book
And
as
that
well.
hopefully, I mean, Robert and I are both hoping there's a sequel to this book, because obviously the end of the story is they've built the heart and soul shelter, so that any animals who are cold or hungry, they go there, and you sort of get a feel for they're all going to have their own little job. So it's about working together to make this work. So the idea for the sequel is we bring another character in who needs help, or who also contributes to the shelter in their own way. So we're hoping by this stage you get to see that, you know, this character's doing this now to help to keep this running, this character's doing this, and they've all sort of gelled together. So that's amazing. The plan. And again, it would keep that momentum of, you know, how your kindness can spiral off, and, you know, we can make this bigger maybe than it originally was.
And I love the fact, sorry, Sheryl, I keep on jumping in, but you've got me quite passionate and excited here. I love the fact that you're reaching out to general members of the public, mainstream publications, and people will be able to get access to this book. And we must put the links in the chat here as well, or on Facebook and Instagram, and every way we can for Golden Rule Day. But you're also working with the likes of Think Equal, that we were talking about before. They're one of the Charter's partners as well. And you've written a number of books for Think Equal. So it's not just a question of putting it out into, you know, bookstores and libraries, which is amazing because we can get access to it that way. You can get it online, I've no doubt as well. But you can get it in your schools through social emotional learning inputs in schools. You can get it, you know, you're writing not just this book, but other books as well. You know, it's great that organizations like Think Equal, and hopefully people that are listening in or watching this now, have their own ideas of how you can communicate the messages of this book, spread the messages of compassion, of kindness, of empathy, or like you are empowering me to think about, why not write something ourselves? Why not put something out there? Whether it's visual, whether it's written, whether it's through music or whatever other way, there are creative ways to get these messages. And it's the necessity that motivated you to write this, because you wanted to have the language to communicate a topic and a theme that was really affecting you, but using other language that, you know, for the next generation. And how important is that?
That's it, yeah. And I mean, I don't know, do you know Empathy Lab UK? Have you worked with them at all? No, well, I'm an ambassador for them, and they are all about how books and book characters, the impact that they have on children, so that, you know, they've done the research, they can see that this actually happens. You know, kids will sort of link to a book character and it will inspire them. So that was the hope with this character is being a rock star. You know, kids will all have the favorite singers, the favorite rock stars. So there's that little sort of something to get them interested. And again, music, you know, it's the universal language of us all, isn't it? It's something that we all love music, no matter if it's different. There's all music is in all of us. It's in all our lives. So
and you're in the city, without drawing too much attention to it, in the city where in terms of the power of music, and obviously, you know, the Beatles and how that reverberated around the world. But again, were their lyrics really complex and really difficult to understand? Absolutely not. Most children can get the lyrics of the Beatles songs as well. Very much embedded with kindness and compassion, and not just given one.
I actually hid one of the books by the Beatles statue.
Say that again?
Yeah, I actually hid one of the books at the weekend by the Beatles statue. There's a busker there. He's like a regular busker. So, you know, there's a crowd of people all lining up to stand by the Beatles statue to get the picture taken. So I sneaked one of my books sort of nearby.
Amazing. Let me know how that that would be great to
Seed
hear.
right.
Yeah, well, you're planting the seeds right in the place there as well, and even thinking of the Beatles with the Beatles in mind. When you talk about Johnny and his big hair, or people with big cars, big smiles, big muscles, houses, whatever it might be, big wallets and big voices a lot of the time. But the biggest thing that you mentioned in the book, or that Johnny brings out, is his heart, not the commercial, the commodity things, the things we feel that we're obviously working. There's nothing wrong with having security. There's nothing wrong with working and aspiring to have things that mean a lot to us. But having that big heart, even though the twist in the story, and we're definitely revealing a lot of this story, but I hope people go ahead and get it anyway. Even though when his voice comes back, he really finds it again and uses it in a very different way despite the fact that the cat is trying to pull him back in to be famous for the sake of being famous. He'd seen and he'd felt compassion and empathy and kindness, and that's what was motivating him in the very start. That's what he wanted to do, and it says that. But we can be misled. We all can be, pulled in one way or distorted in another way, and we all, in many ways, we have our values, we have our intentions, but life can sometimes lead us in directions that, for whatever reason, we lose our voice, or we lose our way, or we lose our true sort of direction. There's ways we can go back, and I love the sort of the positive sort of energy to that towards the end as well. And if I can read it out, Sheryl, what he was saying, because I had to read it a few times, because I think I messed it up the first few times when I was reading to the girls. But again, words are just words. It's what's behind the words. But if you can't do what you do what you can do. It sounds almost again like a tongue twister, but if you can't do what you do or what you're known for doing, you do what you can do. Mary talked about that as well. And then it turns around as a gift. So because his voice comes back, he says, I can do what I do, and I do what I can do. In addition, or maybe I'm getting that wrong somewhere. You're the author, you'll remember it. But
yeah, so by the end, when he's got his voice back, he realizes that he can do what he does and do what he can. So he's got the best of both worlds. He knows he can sing again, but in a different way this time. He can sing the way he likes it, close with his audience, still with his friends around him. But then he's also, because he enjoys what he's been doing, helping the other animals, he knows he can do that as well. So he's doing both. He's helping others and he's singing as well. He's found the perfect combination, really.
It's the gift. It's the gift that he receives from others that inspire, that reaffirms what he already knew and what he already wanted to do. It's not just one language that he's speaking now, it's multiple languages. And so there's so many lessons and layers to the book, and we won't be able to touch on every one of them here. But what I loved at the end of the book as well, you come to, why not do something? And there's some suggestions in there. We mentioned, kindness rocks, designing something that you can give somebody somewhere. And it reminded me of a story that, again, we relate a lot to our own family, but our eldest daughter, again, not being aware of all the atrocities happening, because I think it's far too much for kids to see right now. And we have to be so careful with imagery. And the imagery in this book and the illustrations are, if anything, they're allowing the nervous system of a child to calm down, to relate to it, to rather than what we're seeing on mainstream media and social media. But she is aware that there's sadness. She's aware that there's a lot of poverty. There's a lot of hurt. There's a lot of conflict, and people, unfortunately, that are hurting, that we can't get out and save in every kind of way. But what she started doing was making these little bracelets, and she sent a bracelet to a little boy who sent her a message back from the West Bank the other day. And you want to see the feeling and the light when she lit up when she got a message on a WhatsApp message from this little kid who was physically wearing the bracelet that she had made him, in terms of solidarity and empathy. And
exactly. I was going to say, it says a lot more than just being a bracelet, doesn't it? It's the meaning behind the bracelet, isn't it? That's the true gift. That's lovely.
So the other gifts that you talk about, the teddy bears picnic, it's going to work, and people can adapt that in so many other ways. But there's the celebration of bringing your toys that you love, but also bringing food, and then relating that to a local food security issue in your community, wherever that might be. The Rockstar Day, I can understand how that would clearly work, almost like the sock day, but the Rockstar Day.
Yeah. Well, the teddy bears picnic, again, that's something I've done the last few years in schools, where, again, the children will just bring in stuff for their picnic to share with their friends, but then bring in one other item, which then I usually collect for a food bank. But obviously with these characters now, being able to link your teddy bear's picnic through Busky the bear, you know, there's just the link to the character. They've got that in their head. Oh yeah, this is like in the book. We can do this. You know, it's like when Jonny and Busky are sitting under the stars and they're eating together. So there's the link now where, yeah, we'll do this because we've got this character who he did the same. And, you know, as you say, the Rockstar Day, just the most simple thing. You know, I'm going into a school in a couple of weeks' time. The whole school are dressing up as their favourite rock star. They're bringing a couple of pound in, which is going to go to paper cup coffee. And then we're making the kindness rocks. So it's just, you know, there's no sort of effort involved, or they just do it, but they know that there's good coming from it as well.
And the other one that was really important as well, when I was going through it as well, the sleeping under the stars and asking for, you know, getting a sponsorship of some kind, but, you know, connecting with nature and knowing that nature inspires this innate compassion in all of us to relate more kindly to nature, but also to be inspired by nature to be kinder to other people around us as well. And so that idea of not having a roof over your head, and the empathy that you might gain from, okay, it's an adventure in itself, but you're feeling like how many other people tonight in this moment around the world, you know, a world of multiple billions of people, how many don't have a choice, but they're under these stars as well. They just don't have a roof over their head. And to be able to, again, do something with that experience, that embodied experience of children is priceless, really. And connecting it again to the website that we're launching this week ourselves, which is GoldenRuleism. The can bit is children, is animals, and nature. And I don't think we could have chosen the book. And another book, we had a beautiful book yesterday. We were talking about the invisible gift, and today the kindness rocks. But you've embodied and embedded all of these themes of nature with the animals, and of course the children being the main audience for this book. But there's no reason why adults can't get a huge amount from these books.
And like you say about the sleeping outside, one of the things which I think if schools or parents did that, you know, while it's a fun activity for the children to do, and they can be raising money or donating clothes or warm blankets, one of the things to talk about if you wanted to is, yeah, this is fun, but can you imagine doing this on a bitterly cold night? Or, you know, like you just said, doing it every day, having to do it, it's not through choice. So again, you've got sort of you're empowering them with that they can do something. We can make a difference through doing this. We're going to raise money, or we're going to donate blankets. But you've also got the sort of the mental side of it, which gets them thinking about, but what if this was every day? You know, how would people feel? So the empathy side of things can be developed.
Yeah, I could talk to you all day. I know that. I felt that from our previous chat. And there's so much common aspirations and humanity between everybody when they get into these conversations here as well. But before we finish as well, could you mention again, if you haven't already, where people can get hold of the book and how they might be able to even reach out to you if you have social media, or if you're like you're linking with a lot of schools already. So we'd love to be able to share that a little bit more.
So at the moment, the book came out on the 5th of March in the US and China. So I think it's readily available out there in general bookstores and obviously Amazon. With the UK, it's Amazon UK at the moment, or you can order direct from Yahoo Press, who are the publisher. But Ingram Books, who are the distributor, Ingram UK is actually shipping the books as we speak to the UK. So they should hopefully start to find their way into the shops here, and fingers crossed for some co-editions at Bologna next week, and they should be more widely available then in Europe.
Brilliant. And obviously, yeah, the more local they are, the more local you can get your hands on them, rather than the global, the bigger picture as well, with the likes of Amazon and so on and so on. Not in any way a criticism. We want to get the information out there. We want to get the inspiration out there. But yeah, thinking about our actions and our discernment as well. But if we can get our hands on these local books, and of course you have another 30 books as well. So if you put your name into Google, like I've done a few times, you certainly get access to all the other books. And are there any specific, you said you're an ambassador for an organization there in Liverpool, and there's many other organizations that I'm sure we could talk about and promote, and will continue to promote. But if there was, is there an organization or a way that people might be able to reach out to you as well?
Yeah, I'm on social media. So SherylWebsterAuthor.com is my website. At Sheryl Webster's is my Twitter, which is now X, isn't it? And then Sheryl Webster _author for Instagram.
Brilliant.
So if anyone wants to see me with questions or whatever, that's absolutely fine.
Well, literally a stone throw away from where I was born to where you were born, or I imagine if you were born in Liverpool, it's the closest city away. So it's been a pleasure listening to your impression, your aspirations of the book. That means clearly so much to you. And if we can do our little piece in getting that out to a wider audience as well, among the compassionate cities of the world, and anybody who's just listening in or looking in for the first time as well, how you might be able to get involved with the organizations you've talked about already, in the likes of Think Equal, and just so many more in the UK that are doing fantastic work with literature and with children's stories, capturing people, inspiring young minds, and also the organizations, of course, that the Charter will have linked. And GoldenRuleism it's going to go live this week, this weekend, and into next week. So we're looking forward to sharing that as well, and hopefully collaborating with you, Sheryl, going forward. There's so many links.
I'd really love to. I look forward to Golden Rule Day. I'll be
yeah. But there's always something we can learn as well. So, and it's we think we've grown up and that's it. But going back in my late 30s and reading kids' books, there's been a lot of lessons in those kids' books that I need to sit back, have that space for reflection and a little bit of equanimity, and say, okay, maybe how can I apply this now? If the kids get it, we need to get it as well, and walk the talk.
No, you're right. Absolutely right. Yeah. It's been really lovely to talk to you. Amazing work you're doing. It's just phenomenal, mind-blowing how much you've got going on. I don't know how you do it.
Well, we all do, and it's about taking the little moments to appreciate these conversations as well. So I appreciate your time so much, and I know others will as well. So
thank you very much. Thank you.
Take care. Lovely to meet you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.